Well, I was walking down the street, feeling kind of neat, when the wind came out your butt and blew my wig off. Oh, it was a sight to see, my hair flying in the breeze, 'cause the wind came out your butt and blew my wig off. People started laughing, they couldn't believe their eyes, as my wig flew through the sky. Oh, what a surprise. I tried to catch it, but it slipped right through my hands, 'cause the wind came out your butt and now it's somewhere in the land. Oh, wind came out your butt and blew my wig off. Baby, you drive like shit. Did you see that car that you almost hit? I'd rather take the bus instead. Riding with you, I'm gonna end up dead. Don't ask me if I need a lift. Baby, you drive like shit. She just ran through, always stop. I ain't trying to get stopped by the cops. Baby, why the hell did I let you drive? It's a miracle that you're still alive. Don't ask me if I need a lift. Baby, you drive like shit. Whoa, 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 whoa. Look out, my girl is driving. Watch out, my girl drives like shit. Whoa, 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 whoa. My girl is driving. Watch out, my girl drives like shit. Moving ain't over. Heard you think you're tough. Gotta let you know I will fuck you up. I whoop that ass, talking all that shit, spank that ass till you tap like a bitch. No, I ain't playing. I'm here to kick ass. Whoop that ass, it's time to punch face. I'm the one who brings you pain in the ring. I whoop that ass until the bell rings. Already know that I do not play. Throw a punch like I'm cutting down hay. I whoop that ass every single night. Spank that ass till they stop the fight. I'll tell you the story of a man, a radioactive tip in his hand. His hand grew 10 times its normal size to help him get his money on time. He knew if the bitch was telling a lie, which was 100% of the time. Superpowers to make a bitch listen, then get her naked with sex-ray vision. Sweep a police station in a single bound, slapping bitches down to the fucking ground. His name was famous across the land. They called him the pimp named Superhand. Oh shit, yeah, his pimp named Superhand. He had powers no other pimp had. Oh fuck yeah, his pimp named Superhand. That motherfucker was super bad. Asking for dinner ain't asking for much. You had one job and
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate? You should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
Hello, welcome YouTube fam. I'm Kenique Jackson, your host. Glad to be with you this evening at my YouTube show channel at School for Justice. Today, the name of our topic is our Vice President, current Kamala Harris, unqualified or historical figure. Let you decide, let you be the judge. So I have a video here that I will share with you all today, and we will check it out, a little bit of her background, her history, her credentials, and how she came to the position that she's in now. So let's go ahead and get started on our show. Glad to have you join in with me.
Oh, you guys are at the wrong rally. I think you meant to go to the smaller one down the street.
If you had to be stuck in an elevator with either President Trump, Mike Pence, or Jeff Sessions, who would it be?
Does one of us have to come out alive?
Who is Kamala Harris? What does she believe? And what does her story teach us about how she might govern if elected president?
She is the first woman ever to be the city's top prosecutor.
Kamala is brat.
Kamala, you're fired.
Last week we did Trump. This week it's Kamala. So let me show you the rise of Kamala Harris.
Should be asking, are we smart on crime? We did it, Joe.
I'm speaking.
If somebody breaks in my house, they're getting shot.
We will be prosecuted.
My mother had another lesson she used to teach. Never let anyone tell you who you are. You showed them who you are.
Harris was born in 1964 in Oakland, California. Her father had come to California from Jamaica to get his PhD in economics. Her mother immigrated to the US from southern India, landing in Berkeley, California for the same reason as her father: education. Her parents were married and had 2 kids, Kamala and her younger sister Maya. Growing up, Kamala and her family lived in a mostly black neighborhood in Berkeley. Eventually, her parents divorced in 1972, and Kamala and her sister were raised mostly by their single mother. And it sounds like many single-parent households, it was pretty tough. One thing we know for sure is that Kamala's mother was a major influence on her as a child.
My mother was a brilliant, 5-foot-tall, brown woman with an accent. And it was mostly my mother who raised us. So my mother, that was my mother.
And her mother is the origin of this now viral quote.
I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
You exist in the context of all in which you live and will change for you.
Coconut tree.
Kamala's childhood was happening just at the time the civil rights movement was at its height. This fight wasn't theoretical for her. It was happening in her literal front yard.
We grew up pretty much surrounded full-time by adults who spent their time marching and shouting about this thing called justice.
As an elementary school student, Kamala was a part of some of the first efforts to desegregate schools by busing kids from predominantly black neighborhoods to try to integrate these cities that had been so deeply divided by race.
There was a little girl.
So I would like to stop there. We already have a background of pretty much her family history, her family tree. Her mother was India. She's an Indian woman, and her father is Jamaican. Okay, so those are her roots and her heritage. She is Indian and Jamaican. Now, can she relate to the inner, pretty much minority struggles growing up in the civil rights movements? Yes, she can. Her parents participated and protested into segregation and discrimination during that time, even here in America. Okay. Also, she can relate to the minorities, people who, came from hardworking parents, just the upper middle class levels. So she was not born with a silver spoon in her mouth. Okay. And so let's just continue to see a little bit more of her background, her upbringing, and how she is and have accomplished what she has today.
Girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
Okay, so at this point, you start to see some of these influences that go on to inform the rest of her life. Her immigrant parents, especially her single mother who raised her, the civil rights movement happening around her, and the neighborhood that she grew up in. In middle school, Kamala's mom accepted a job in Montreal as a cancer researcher. She talks about this as being a big opportunity for her mom, but she was a teenager and she was not thrilled to be moving to Canada. Friends at the time describe high schooler Kamala as bookish, bubbly, and to have blended in with everyone easily. After graduating high school in 1982, she enrolled in Howard University in Washington, D.C., where she studied political science and economics. During her time at college, she took on student leadership positions, participated on the debate team, and continued to show an interest in activism, participating in protests on campus. While in DC, you also start to see her turn more towards politics. She spends both her summers and during the school year interning at government institutions, places like the Federal Trade Commission, or interning for a California senator. She worked at the National Archives. She was a tour guide at the U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing. And in between all of this, she also took on summer jobs to make money, the most famous of which being her stint at McDonald's. Which, like, during this election, people have been trying to debunk or like spread rumors that she didn't work at McDonald's, like it's some highly controversial thing. Anyway, the point here is there's a major paradox happening in Paris's life that we start to see. On one hand, she's influenced by activism. She's critical of government. She's protesting it, while also working within old government institutions that she was often critiquing as unfair. This is a major theme within her life, one you can see in this speech that she gave to Howard graduates in 2017.
You can march for Black lives on the street, and you can ensure law enforcement accountability by serving as a prosecutor or on a police commission. Somebody is going to make the decision. So why not let it be you?
Okay, so it's the mid-80s.
So I'm gonna stop right here. And also I want to hit key points that she did get interested in being an activist and for politics. And as we know, her father has a background as a politician as well. And also she was a part of the Howard University student, as we learned. So let's continue and let's see what they further have to say.
80s, and Harris returns to California for law school. This is where we start to see more influences. Like one summer, she was an intern at the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, and she gets her first real taste for how powerful a role as a public prosecutor can be.
I was working on a case and I realized that among those arrested was an innocent bystander. But it was late on a Friday afternoon. The case would not get called until Monday. I pleaded for the judge to come back. I would not leave until the judge finally gave in. And when that happened, with the swipe of a pen, this woman got to go home to her children. That woman taught me that when you see something in front of you that's wrong, you can just go ahead and do what you know is right.
Okay, so
I'm definitely going to intervene here. So as we have heard, and we know that Ms. Kamala Harris was a prosecutor, attorney general for the state of California, and also the major prosecutor there. And we've been told that she incarcerated a lot of us people, our own kind, her own kind, the minorities, Black men, and so forth. So as we're learning the facts and the receipts of her history and the building of her career, yes, she did her job, but she also corrected that behavior, you know, where there was an incident that she seen an innocent person was charged and wrongfully accused. She corrected that behavior. Also, if we dig in deep into her her background and do some more researching, she set up re-entry programs once she discovered that the judicial system was being pretty much hypocrisy according to their way of designed by the laws. That she digged in deep to learn the solution to the problems, and when she seen that that was not the solution, she learned how to correct that behavior by setting up re-entry programs and other assets to set people up for success once they were released out of the system. So let's just dig in a little bit more closer and see what all Miss Kamala Harris has done for our country.
We're now getting to the point that got me really curious about Harris. We have this list of initial influences that have informed her life, but now we get to the more visible part. What she did when she was in the public eye, during her career, her decisions, her words. They paint a picture, and I want to show it to you.
Most important things don't come easy. So it's not going to be a cakewalk. There's a lot of work to do.
Okay, but before we dive in, let's define this word prosecutor, which is a word that you're going to hear a lot when you talk about Kamala Harris. A public prosecutor is the government's lawyer. They're responsible for presenting the evidence and the case against people or businesses accused of committing a crime. And here in the United States, they're often seen as hawks. They're tough on crime, responsible for upholding America's habit of throwing millions in jail for nonviolent crimes. Okay? Public prosecutor. Big part of Kamala Harris's life. So after law school, Harris becomes a public prosecutor in California, first in Alameda County, and then for the city of San Francisco, and then eventually for the entire state of California. So now Kamala Harris, this activist turned kind of politician lawyer, takes on the role that is kind of the definition of tough on crime, working to convict criminals, advocating to lock them up, and upholding the status quo of our justice system.
Serious and violent crime, lock them up.
But Harris says that she's a different kind of public prosecutor. She calls herself a progressive prosecutor. Huh? This strikes people as kind of a contradiction.
Are you soft on crime or are you tough on crime? Instead, I believe we should be asking, are we smart on crime?
Again, here in the United States, progressives tend to advocate for reform to our justice system. They say that the system is too harsh, locking up way too many people who are disproportionately brown and black men, often for...
So right here to the key point, she says, are we tough on crime? Are we soft on crime? Or are we smart on crime? Well, let's define that. So that's digging deep in her strategy of getting a solution to the problems for crime. What is normally the struggles that builds up to crime? Broken homes, drug addiction, and the list goes on with our society. So in other words, we have to learn to get to the root of a problem in order to solve it. And that's what Ms. Harris shows that her main key points were. Let's continue to watch.
For nonviolent crimes and for far too long. That's one of many critiques. And as I mentioned, prosecutors are kind of seen as the ones doing the locking up. So to get through this next section, let's put both of these words on a scale. And as we look at her career, let's assess what she's done that represents the progressive side of the scale, and what of her actions represent more of the traditional prosecutor side. I'm going to go through the progressive side first, but then I will get to the prosecutor side. So don't forget that that's coming.
Early intervention leaves room in our prisons for the violent criminals who should be there.
First up, Harris says that being a progressive prosecutor means holding serious criminals to account while focusing on preventing crime in the first place. She focuses on stopping the crime before it happens. And to do this, throughout her career, she focuses a lot on data.
Let's look at the issue that we're presented with in California beyond one criminal case and look at the crime problem. Nationally, 75%, 54% to less than 10%, and 43% to over 90%, 70% reoffend.
The context here is that crime is one of those issues that easily scares us. No matter your political leanings, every person wants to feel safe.
So we know in the data, in the percentage, 70% reoffends. And statistics states that once you're released out of prison, within those 3 years, you will go back or reoffend. Okay, so she says the strategy is how can we prevent or stop the crimes from occurring? What can we do to change that scenario? Let's check it out.
There's a lot of emotions driving how our justice system works, how we treat criminals. But Harris wanted to change this. She wanted to use the analysis of numbers to help inform systems of justice and law enforcement that were more equitable, more rational, and to see in the data, why are these people committing crimes in the first place? She's building public databases.
Let's focus on what we can do to prevent crime. before it occurs.
Publishing statistics on crimes.
Elementary school students missing 60, 70, 80 days of a 180-day school year.
Arrest data.
I was told prosecutors don't need to focus on recidivism. I was told prosecutors should not focus on the needs of children.
A public database for police practices.
Did an analysis of who our homicide victims were. 94% of them were high school dropouts. Perhaps untraditional for me to ask the question, but I did. I got the answer.
Oh, and she took this like data-driven prevention effort pretty far, and it got kind of controversial when she came out and said that the state should be prosecuting parents with a crime if their kids miss too much school. And in a few cases, she actually did that.
So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco. And frankly, my staff went bananas. They were very concerned.
Okay, a few more things on the progressive side of the scale here, and then we'll get to the prosecutor side. She fought against applying the death penalty. She fought big banks and won convictions after the 2008 housing crisis.
We have delivered to California $18 billion in relief for California's homeowners.
She fought and won $1 billion for victims of a predatory for-profit university.
We are talking about Corinthian colleges taking advantage of Californians who simply aspire to achieve the American dream.
And perhaps her most nationally recognized moment as Attorney General is the moment where she told the clerk of Los Angeles to begin issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples, back during when this was a big debate around Proposition 8, or the legality of gay marriage.
This is Kamala Harris. You must start marriages immediately.
Okay, so this is a list of the progressive against versus the prosecutor with her as Attorney General and what Kamala fought for. Okay, smart on crime, anti-death penalty, punish of the big banks. It also says number 4, prosecute for profit university, and the fight, or rather for gay rights or gay marriage. So let's continue to see. These are basically a contribute and a list of the things that Ms. Harris has done previously, both prior to her becoming our vice president. Okay, so my question is, has she gained any credit, or have we given her her flowers for the pay that she has made, and for the hard work that she has accomplished? What do you think?
Okay, but hold your horses. There's another side to this story. So far, I've made Harris look like this reform-minded, progressive champion as a prosecutor. But let's look at the other side of the scale.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Lock them up.
Aggressively prosecuting violent criminals as San Francisco's first African-American DA.
First, the death penalty. In 2014, as Attorney General, in a seemingly reversal of her previous actions as district attorney, she actually fought to keep the death penalty in California by appealing a ruling that would have effectively ended it in the state. In another case, the Supreme Court came out and said that California's prisons were so overcrowded that it violated the Constitution as cruel and unusual punishment. And yet, her office supported the governor's fight against releasing prisoners. Over the years, she resisted or fought against some criminal justice reforms. Her office prosecuted almost 2,000 people in cannabis-related offenses, as well as defending the cash bail, which critics see as unfairly punishing lower-income defendants. Okay, I know this is a lot of like, we're in the weeds of the justice system, and like with the Trump video, I was able to be like in the weeds on like branded vodka and giant towers in New York City. But Kamala's story is actually this. It's like she has been in the weeds on criminal justice policy, and her critics and her fans debate as to how progressive or hawkish she was in the system. And so that is how we are evaluating her here. I know it's not as...
So how progressive and effective do you think she was in the system? Was it not enough? Was it she not gaining her credit, or was it just for a lack of effort? What do you think?
Fun is watching Donald Trump like be in The Apprentice, but This is her career.
She's California's most innovative district attorney.
After going through all of these critiques, you can see why some liberals call BS on her whole idea of being a progressive prosecutor, saying that her career was actually built off of maintaining a tough-on-crime policy while sprinkling in some progressive reforms. No matter how you judge all of this, what's clear is that Harris continues to mind that balance that she has her whole life, where she's clearly has earnest progressive values and ideals, but she also is pragmatic and works within the system that she believes is where she can make change, which means upholding the status quo. But what this looks like, especially now that she's under the microscope of the entire world, no one really knows where she stands because there's seemingly contradictory or inconsistent behavior here. I'll share my read on that in just a sec, but first, let's see what happens next.
I am excited to stand before you as a proud California candidate for the United States Senate.
The election has been exhausting because of the news cycle. I feel like every day there's like 150 news stories that I should be following, but they're coming from all these different news outlets that all have different biases. Luckily, there is a solution for that, and that is the sponsor of today's video, Ground News. Ground News aggregates news stories from around the world into one place. It is a website and an app that helps me cut through the noise when I'm reading the news because it allows me to see the bias of this different coverage. What articles lean right, what articles lean left, the factuality rating, how reliable it is, and who owns these different news outlets, which affects the coverage. This is such an important tool during this time in our history and how the media is so polarized. Right now, they have this specific election page, which helps you be alert to political spin and sensationalism. You can see information and reporting on each candidate. I love this blind spot feature they have that allows you to see stories that you wouldn't naturally click, helps you round out your reading. Right now, Ground News is giving 50% off to anyone who signs up using my link. You can click over to this Issues tab to find out what's trending each week, from foreign policy to crime to immigration, and get coverage on these topics. Ultimately, Ground News is a tool that helps me be a more conscious, critical news consumer. So to get this massive discount, just use the link in my description. It is ground.news/Johnny Harris, or just scan the QR code here on screen. You can sign up for the Vantage plan, which has all of these features I talked about today. And hopefully it can help you, like it has me, become a more critical thinker about today's crazy news cycle. Thank you, Ground News, for sponsoring today's video. And with that, let's get back to the rise of Kamala Harris. In 2016, Harris won the election to become California's next senator. The backdrop of her victory was a country, specifically the progressive communities, shook by the election of Donald Trump.
Do we retreat or do we fight? I say we fight. I intend to fight.
Now, Harris is a prosecutor, a professional legal fighter. And over the next few years, she used her experience to grill Trump cabinet officials and nominees as they came before the Senate.
Can you think of any laws that give the government the power to make decisions about the male body? Has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone? Yes or no, please, sir? Perhaps they've suggested.
I don't know. I wouldn't say suggest.
Hinted.
And then 2 years later,
I stand before you today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States.
During this campaign,
So, do we retreat or do we fight? What do you think pertaining to Ms. Kamala Harris' strategy and, her ethnicity as well? Standing up for the common man, standing up for minorities, standing up for the voiceless, standing up for the poor? Or do you think it was for clout, for a status, for a purpose? Do you think that her position was irrelevant? Let's just continue to check it out. I just want us to kind of open up our minds and just make a more broader perspective and bring it to the forefront. So let's continue to check it out and tell me what you think.
Everyone in a Democratic campaign, she swung far to the left, saying that she espoused pretty left-leaning policies, something that has come back to bite her basically every week during this election. But she didn't gain traction, and she soon pulled out of the race.
I'm suspending our campaign today.
But soon, she got a call from the Democratic nominee to join the ticket.
You ready to go to work?
Oh my God, I'm so ready to go to work.
And as the vice presidential nominee, during the debates especially, her experience as a prosecutor continued to define her reputation.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
Biden and Harris won the White House in 2020.
We did it, Joe.
But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.
Okay, now listen, I'm going to be honest here. When I started reporting this story, I kind of thought that this next part was going to be the juiciest part. Like, what does she do when she's vice president? And it ended up being the least helpful in understanding Kamala Harris. I've wrestled with this and concluded that I can't exactly learn a ton about Harris from her 4 years as vice president. Partly because it was Joe Biden's administration and the vice president doesn't really call the shots. And partly because of the task that she was given, which was the duty of fixing the root causes of migration from Central America to the US's southern border. Like, good luck. The mandate was go use American power to fix poverty, systemic corruption, and gang violence in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras so that people stop trying to come to the United States. I've reported a lot on migration and borders, and specifically in Central America, and I can tell you that one vice president has no chance of making a dent in these issues, especially in just a couple of years.
So was that a fair task to give her? That no vice president can make these, on their own and call these decisions to make a drastic change with the immigration and migration problems we have in our nation? Was it a fair task to give to one vice president and just make it her call and all the burden placed on her? What do you think?
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come.
Now, you can read her 5-pillar plan, but when I read it, it just feels kind of bland and familiar. Like the many reports with aspirational language about how the US can somehow fix systemic problems in other countries. Stuff like this does not work, or if it does not work quickly. And to add to all of this, the American people seem to misunderstand what her task actually was. And this includes me, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I, like a lot of people, thought that Kamala Harris was in charge of the border, this border situation. Like she was supposed to fix what we do with people coming to the border. And all I'm seeing on TV is record numbers of migrants arriving to the border, huge numbers of unaccompanied young people, and not just from Central America, but from tons of countries. Who was to blame for this big crisis on the border? Many looked at the vice president because wasn't she the border czar in charge of all of this? No, she wasn't, but we all thought she was. And it didn't help that in one of her first media appearances, she kind of waffled some pretty basic questions about this.
This whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe.
Now, to be fair and generous here, I should say that when you look at the most recent data, migration to the US border has gone down quite a bit, especially if you look at people coming from the 3 countries that Kamala Harris was tasked with fixing. And if I were Kamala Harris, I would be touting this, shouting it from the rooftops as a huge success of her big role. And while I think her initiatives of meeting with the leaders and trying to get more business to Central America to make jobs and fix these root problems were earnest and well-intentioned, I just truly don't think that it's reasonable for us to evaluate her based on any of these metrics. A vice president has no.
So we see that that's the receipts we have here. That was not our vice president's task pertaining to the border and anything, on an executive order or bills or laws that may need to be passed or signed. That was not a part of her position and role or task as our vice president. So she was questioned a lot about it and of course accused a lot about it. How does that fly with you?
Chance of fixing these deeply rooted systemic issues in other countries in just a few years. Okay, I've made that point. Let's move on.
Look, I'm not a young guy. With the COVID, excuse me,
Joe Biden is extraordinarily strong.
Bad debate nights happen. Trust me, I know.
President Biden has decided to step out of the race for the White House.
He is offering his full support and endorsement for Kamala Harris.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
So, here we are, kind of in modern day. We all know what happens next. Vice President Kamala Harris gets thrust into becoming the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, as Joe Biden comes to grips with the fact that his age and declining mental acuity was a guarantee that he would lose and Donald Trump would be our next president.
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
So Harris is now in the spotlight, and voters are wondering how she will be as a president. What does her past, both personal and professional, tell us about how she'll govern? And the answer to that is pretty unclear, partly because over the course of her career, Harris has shifted and morphed her views based on the system and the situation that she's in. That's what we've seen as we've talked about it here briefly. She doesn't have a record that shows some absolute ideological consistency, which has been perhaps her number one critique, that Kamala's record simply is not consistent. And yet her character seems to be consistent. Her lived experience is as well. So after doing this research on her life, I do believe her when she says,
My values have not changed.
And
So what's more important, your record being inconsistent or your character staying consistent? What's more valuable? What's more credible? What's more trustworthy? To be in a position of leadership or a chief commander? Or record being inconsistent, or record being inconsistent, or your character being consistent.
this election is weird. They're getting weirder every time, but this one's super weird. She's running against a showman, a professional marketer, businessman caricature who campaigns on his non-political achievements, his personality, not his policy proposals. Kamala Harris was born to immigrant parents who came to the United States looking for education and opportunity. And through hard work and endurance, she pushed her way up through the ranks to where she is today, all without serious scandals or dings to her character. The only thing we could dig up on her is that she dated the mayor of San Francisco, and that may or may not have helped her get a job or a position on some insurance board. But this was a consensual relationship. There was no cheating. It's not very juicy. So regardless of what you think of her politics, her stance on crime, I do think it is still legitimate to consider this personal character, especially when we're thinking about the most powerful person in our country, the leader of the country. Because leaders lead with their personal experience as a guide. And this woman has lived a life that allows her to relate to a lot of everyday Americans, something that seems to be in short supply among leaders these days. So I
definitely would like to emphasize with you all pertaining to character. So let's just take a small brief illustration, for example. If you're just applying for a position and a job, just in the work field, just average day-to-day career. Character, is that not an issue for the superiors and supervisors and the leaders in authority who have to hire you? Management, is that not important to them to say, hey, what is this person's character? Who would we be dealing with? Who would we be working with? Is that not a reason that they use tools for background checks and history checks and references, sheets and history and so forth? Is character, how far of a stretch can character go with, where does it go with us in life? So just think about that for a minute. Now, to the point that it's position over character now, we have unequal scales, where our value has decreased, our values have changed. So they said, as far as us digging deep and doing any trying to backgrounds and trying to find any dirt or anything on Kamala. The only thing they discovered was she consensually, as an adult, dated one of her pretty much employees, or her supervisor, so to speak, her superior, rather, her superior, which was Willie Brown. Other than that, even Guy here says there's nothing juicy about it. So her values has never changed. And does character not define your actions lining up with your words? Let's continue to put our thinking skills on, critical thinking. Let's continue to use that and check out our video.
Don't know how Kamala Harris will govern if she becomes president. But from looking at her record, I do feel fairly convinced that she has a sense of ethics and morals and values. And I think that is important to consider. So if you are of voting age and you're an American, let me tell you one thing for certain. You are likely to not vote. In this country, only half of the people between 18 and 29 who are eligible to vote actually turn up. So our democracy is totally distorted because not everyone's voice is counted. I'll put a link here where you can go register and find your place to vote. And with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey folks, for those still here, I just, finished recording this video, and I just recorded the Trump one yesterday, and I'm struck with how different they are. That could be a reflection of my personal bias. Like, obviously I came down somewhere on each of these, but it's also a reflection of the different lives that they've lived. Donald Trump's life is so full of tension and scandal and kind of tantalizing details, and very like visual, all of his products and tabloids and all this stuff. Kamala's life is way more boring because she just kind of lived out her years as a public prosecutor, doing kind of unsexy work. And it's very stark to me how these videos are going to feel differently, both because of the way that I approach them, but also visually. So I hope this was useful for those of you who are trying to understand Kamala Harris and are maybe deciding who to vote for or whatever. I hope that even in spite of some of the places I came down and some of my perspectives, that doesn't change the fact that you need to make up your mind and decide and go with your gut and do what you feel. And the most important.
So y'all, I think we're good on that note. For now, I'm trying to see if I can get you all. Okay, yeah. So we should be good to go. And what do you all think about the video? I just want to share that with you all here. Use our critical thinking skills, and basically about character. Was Ms. Kamala Harris, is she a historical figure? Is she a barrier breaker? Is she a leader? Is she a woman of integrity? So is character thrown out the window, morals, values, principles, to the point we don't care who's in a position of leadership over our country, over our nation? It's about, our goals and our values and priorities have changed. What is it about? I just want to share with you all. I want to have a conversation. I want to have dialogue. Me personally, when it comes to politics, I'm neither a Republican nor a Democrat. Independent party is where it's at. Our whole democracy needs to be destroyed. Our generations, everything has changed. The amendment needs to be rewritten, and democracy needs to be destroyed. The constitutional amendment needs to be rewritten, for our modern, up-to-date time and day and age. And it's independent party. Today is where it's at. I'm definitely an activist on that. But what do you think? What do you see? That that we have someone in office who we can't trust. We don't know what's going to happen from today to tomorrow. Who has a very unstable, double-minded history and paper trail. So that overruled and overreigned over a woman of status and character and overqualified for the job. Was she a historical figure? Is she a leader? Did she set the example for our young women, for our young girls, to show hope, to show change, to do and achieve the impossible? You all decide. And with that, I basically share, and glad to have you join in on my show this evening. And until next time, we'll meet up again. Peace.